This video was originally recorded at the Force for Good class series at Tibet House, New York in February 2018. To learn more about this ongoing series happening at Tibet House and online, please visit tibethouse.us.
And the mind is very powerful. And let me give you a more simple example. Take a nuclear weapon dropped on Hiroshima, let's say. Immensely destructive thing, mushroom cloud, like the whole thing, right? Oppenheimer looked up in the one in Nevada and he said, now we have become the destroyer, of the universe. He had some knowledge of Indian religion, Shiva, the destroyer, he related it to. And then there's all kind of formulas, nuclear power, plutonium, decay rate of highly unstable isotopes of things, and then there's some kind of energy put into it, heat and energy of something exploding that's a trigger mechanism, and then it's a structure, and it goes like that, back and back and back. But what is one ingredient that we normally wouldn't think of? No, your physicist would not think. That is hatred in a person's mind. The hatred in the person's mind, first of all, would create and invent and design it, thinking that there might be a case I want to destroy a lot of people and a lot of real estate. And then definitely there's hatred that is the triggering mechanism. Somebody presses a button who wants to destroy a bunch of people. We want to destroy the Japanese because we were fighting them on Iwo Jima and things, and it's too tiresome to fight them man to man. So we're going to destroy a bunch of civilians. And that'll scare them into surrendering. And also it'll scare the Russians off from invading the northern island, as we now know is one of the main motives, actually. Rather than scaring the Japanese high command, it was also scaring the Russians. But anyway, never mind. Point is that hatred is an energy, and it moves your finger to press a button. And then that can kill innumerable amounts of people when you magnify that hatred technologically. So a nuclear explosion is a hatred-developed device. It comes from hatred. And of course, intelligence shapes the activity of the hatred, but it's definitely hatred. So that's a mental energy that's part of nature. It's not supernormal, and it's a trigger mechanism. Without that, you will not have a nuclear bomb, right? So the mind is part of it. Yeah, what are you going to say?
More fear?
What?
Fear. Isn't it fear that trigger?
Okay. Quibble. You're a physicist, so you don't believe that the mind is a force in nature. That's what they don't believe.
No,
But I don't want to discuss it a bit. Fine. Fear, hatred, similar. But it's hatred, actually, is the reaction. Hatred triggers the thing. Fear, you would go cower somewhere. You wouldn't necessarily bomb a bunch of people running around in paper houses wearing kimonos trying to make like some sushi. Not really. You would drop it, and actually they have no excuse. Truman had no excuse of not dropping it in the bay. Why Hiroshima? He could put it in Tokyo Bay, and there'd be a lot of dead fish, which would be unfortunate. But if he was trying to scare some people, that'd be a good way to scare them. At least give them one shot and blow it up in the bay. No, he drops it on a city, and in the second city too. Not good, bad karma. But anyway, my point is only that there is the power of mind. So if you expand from that, the interaction of millions of minds, billions, countless, innumerable minds, and not all just human minds, also some sort of superhuman type of beings, that this creates shapes the inert matter, right? Because matter, what is matter? You guys, you blow it up in your electron accelerator, and then you see some fragments of things, and Higgs boson. Otherwise, we don't even know what is mass. And even they say Higgs boson, we don't know what that is really. And it's surrounded by all this dark matter, and we never even saw that. So it's like the whole thing is like a construct of inferences. And nobody really knows what matter even is. So it's not as preposterous, in other words, to say that the universe is a collective mind field of beings, an intersecting and interactive mind field of beings. We certainly know that the quality of our experience in a group, at a dinner, at a party, is what are the vibes of people in their mind and how friendly and loving and careful and kind and self-restrained they are versus how angry with each other and what bad moods they're in and how they want to have a fight or whatever. You know, we know that just changes the whole space. We do know that. It can be lethal even. We know that. So mind is really a power, you know. That's a very important point in Buddhist science, not just a fantasy. You know? So anyway, Buddha goes on in the long soliloquy about how the Buddha verse is made of all positive things, made of generosity, made of morality, made of patience and tolerance, made of love, made of compassion. He just goes on with every positive thing, made of wisdom, every possible positive thing you can think of. And he ends by saying, the purity of the Buddha verse, or Buddha field, reflects the purity of living beings. The purity of living beings reflects the purity of his wisdom. Purity of his wisdom reflects the purity of his teaching. Purity of his teaching, the Bodhisattva that is, reflects the purity of the transcendental practice. And the purity of his transcendental practice reflects the purity of his own mind, that is to say, Bodhisattva, the one who makes the Buddha field, you know, becomes a Buddha and makes the Buddha field. So then one of the Buddha's disciples, who's a saint actually, and is already enlightened in a certain way as far as their personal sense of nirvana. They've already achieved that. But their souls are running around and they don't see the world as having changed, and they don't understand nirvana as being something either everybody has or nobody has. They think somehow they still have a personal nirvana, and this comes up later, that you can be liberated from suffering without taking everybody with you, which ultimately Buddha doesn't agree. But he lets them think that because those particular persons who are male, mostly Brahmins mostly, and who don't want to go in the kitchen and whatever, you know, they couldn't conceive of changing the whole world, you know, so they can just change themselves. So he lets them do that. So he thinks, if the Buddha field is perfect only to the extent that the mind of the Bodhisattva is perfect, then when Shakyamuni Buddha, that's the one standing in front of him, that's the Buddha, our historical Buddha, was engaged in the career of the Bodhisattva, his mind must have been imperfect. Otherwise, how could this Buddha-verse, this world, appear to be so imperfect? He's a Buddha, so this should be his Buddha world, according to this theory, but it's very imperfect. So he must have been a really crappy Bodhisattva. He just thinks this because he doesn't want to be irreverent to his beloved Buddha. So then Buddha, knowing telepathically the thought of the venerable Shariputra, said to him, what do you think, Shariputra? Is it because the sun and moon are impure that those blind from birth do not see them? The sun and moon are imperfect, they don't have light or something because they're not visible to a blind person? He says, no, Lord, it is not so. The fault lies with those blind from birth and not with the sun and moon. Otherwise, they just don't have the ability to see them. But it declared in the same way, Shariputra, the fact that some beings do not behold the splendid display of the virtues and merits of the Buddha field of the Buddha, of the Tathagata, the transcendent Buddha, is due to their own ignorance. It is not the fault of the Buddha. Shariputra, the Buddha field of the Tathagata is perfect, pure, but you do not see it. Then the Brahma Shikin, that is the creator God, but Buddhists don't believe there is a creator God, but the people in the society at that time think he's the creator. It's kind of interesting to have him weigh in here. And he starts scolding Shariputra. He says, oh, Shariputra, you have a poor vision, and I see it as perfect. I see Buddha world as perfect. So God jumps in and says, that's perfect, you know. Backs Buddha up. So then, but Shariputra holds his ground because he's very wise. And he says, well, as for me, O Brahma, I see this great earth with its highs and its lows, its thorns, its precipices, its peaks and its abysses, as if it were entirely filled with excrement. It's like a pile of crap, I see it, basically, he says. And the Brahma Shikin replied, the fact that you see such a Buddha field as this, as if it were so imperfect and impure, Reverend Shariputra, is a sure sign that there are highs and lows in your mind, and that your positive thought in regard to the Buddha wisdom is not perfect either. Reverend Shariputra, those whose minds are impartial toward all living beings, and whose positive thoughts toward the Buddha intuition are pure, see this Buddha field as perfectly pure. So Brahma insists that Shariputra has imperfect vision. That's the problem. But Shariputra doesn't agree, because he thinks his vision is the real vision. So then Buddha takes his foot like this and he goes like that. He touches the ground with his big toe. And then he produces a second special effect. Like the first one where he showed that canopy like the planetarium. Now he shows a much more powerful one where suddenly everybody sees the world as perfect. They see it as the best of all possible worlds for themselves. They see themselves in the best possible place for learning what they need to learn on their path toward Buddhahood. And they suddenly don't blame the environment, they don't blame the imperfection of their circumstances and their situation. They realize that somehow their own view of it is imperfect, and that they actually, in the best possible place, they're in the best seat in the house. They suddenly feel that way. And they put it in terms of, they say, thereupon the Lord touched the ground of the billion-world galactic universe with his big toe, and suddenly it was transformed into a huge mass of precious jewels. They put it in terms of, something of value, so they say jewels. A magnificent array of many hundreds of thousands of clusters of precious gems, until it resembled the universe of the Tathagata Ratnavyuha, that's a Buddha who's in a jeweled plasma universe. Anantaguna Ratnavyuha. Everyone in the entire assembly was filled with wonder, each perceiving himself or herself seated on a throne of jeweled lotuses. And of course, this is Indian thing about jewels. We think of that as not comfortable, sitting on a bunch of diamonds, like how completely uncomfy. But in the Indian sort of thing, they are called divine gems that are like jewel plasma, like liquid diamond, like pillows made of ruby, liquid ruby, they're sort of, the substance is kind of cozy. So then the Buddha said to them,
this video was brought to you in part through the generous support of the Tibet House US membership community and viewers like you. To learn more about the benefits of Tibet House membership, including special tours with Robert Thurman and geographic expeditions, please visit tibethouse.us. Trips in 2019 include Sri Lanka.